I can see. Yes, thank you very much. As a way of introduction, I am Professor Dean. I am your module leader, your subject head for criminal law, the CRW2602 specific crimes. And I have to say, it's indeed a pleasure that I can, that I have the opportunity to lecture you here today. And I am overwhelmed by the amount of students that have come into the lecture this morning. Some of you were so eager, and it was so heartening to see that you booked your places quite early this morning for fear that there's some kind of you won't be allowed in. Sorry, I'm just reading the chat here, and someone is saying there's echoing. The echo would probably be from your side, students, unless everyone else is having that issue. But I've tested my connection here, so I am good to go. I'm still waiting for Nkosi. I think he's frozen there, but it is quite disruptive that his picture is still on screen. So all I was going to do is I was going to show you. Yes, thank you, Showers. There is no echo there. So if there's an echo and there's issues on your side, please try and resolve it, because I think that we need to start going ahead with the lecture, and I don't want to go too much over time considering data issues. Okay, so each and every one of you here are welcome. A special word of welcome to my colleagues, and a special word of welcome to each and every one of you. So let's start. What I'm going to do for now is I am going to share my screen with you. So shame, you poor students don't have to look at. You don't have to look at others' videos in the meantime, because the most important part of any job, any examination, is the ability to follow an instruction. And it's so saddening to see that for the last 15 minutes, we've been asking our students to switch off their cameras, and a simple instruction like that is not being adhered to. So I'd ask you once again to please, while I'm looking for my lectures, for you to please switch off your cameras. Okay. Okay, students, tell me if you, I'm going to stop sharing and try it again. Okay, just a thumbs up if you can see the lectures notes. Yes, we can. Thank you very, very much. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go off camera, so I don't eat into any more of the bandwidth. And then when there is times for us to when there's questions, etc., then I will come back on. Okay, so as long as you can see as long as we are able to see the presentation, which I'm sure that you can, we will go. So welcome again to the specific crime CRW2602. This presentation today, a special thank you to Professor Mollema for her guidance and assistance in developing the study notes for this online lecture. Now, before I go on, before I go into the notes and the content of study unit 1, there are certain information that you're going to need to take into consideration. Now, you need. For many of you, this is CRW2602. Many of you should already know that CRW2602 follows on from the general principles of criminal law, which is your CRW2601 module. So what we are doing here in this module is that we are presupposing that you already have knowledge of the content of the CRW2601 module. So therefore, if you are registered simultaneously, meaning if you are registered for both CRW2601 and 2602, you will need to learn and understand the principles of 2601 first before you can actually understand the principles of CRW2602. This is why if you're a student that's registered for both simultaneously, you will see that our assignments for the CRW2602 module will be later than the CRW2601 module. Point number 2, you are all well aware that there are 2 prescribed textbooks for this module. Okay, there are 2 prescribed textbooks, and there are other works like Birchall and Hochter. What I need you to understand is it is important to remember that for the examination, what we will be testing you on is the entire contents. Is the entire contents of the study guide. I'm sorry, students. I just received a view. One of my colleagues told me that I needed to do something. Move to the full view screen slide view. Okay, view. Just hold on for me. Apparently, you all are having. Should I fit to? Is that better? Can you see that better? Barry, if you can just answer me on the chat, if you can see that better. Sorry, students, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make the slide bigger for you so that you'll be able to follow better. View, I am trying. Okay, then it's a slideshow. Okay, let me do that. No. Is that better, students? Barry, if you can just acknowledge if that is a little bit better for you. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for that, Barry. I really appreciate it. Thank you, students. So what I'm going to do then is, as I said, I've already been through the point number one. I've also decided, I've also informed you that even though you have prescribed text for this module and that you have other works like Birchall and Hoctor, what you need to remember is that for the examination, you must know the entire contents of your study guide. Now, the reason why we give you students extra reading material is we believe in the fullness or the graduateness of our students, in the sense that we are not only skilling you to pass an examination. We are skilling you or upskilling you so that whenever you are out there in the world of practice or academia, you are aware that you are not only limited to the knowledge or information that is in your study guide. So that is the importance of us bringing the prescribed textbooks or the textbooks and other works on the specific crimes to your attention. Okay. The other thing is, why do we expect you to learn at the end of this module? You know what, guys? There's something happening with my screen here. I'm not sure why I can't. It's going on and off, so it's gone back to the other view. Hopefully, you'll still be able to see it. Natasha, please switch off your camera. I think that is what's causing the issues here, because it's just Annelius, sorry, please switch off your cameras. Okay, what do we expect you to learn at the end of this module? The reason that I am speaking about what you need to learn is I always believe that you need to have context when you are studying or when you are studying. So what do we expect from you from specific crimes? This course is going to enable you to determine whether a person has committed one or more specific crimes, sorry about the omission of the word, by measuring the person's conduct and the state of mind against the various elements of the specific crime or crimes. Now, I know it sounds like a bit much, but what we are basically saying is we want you at the end of this module to be able to identify a specific conduct as belonging to a specific type of crime. And we need you to understand what the definition of the crimes are, and we need you to understand what elements make up that specific crime. Now, if this is sounding a little bit too much for you, please just note that what I will explain this a little better in a few moments. Okay. Now we're going on to what it is that you are here to study. And I know I'm going a little bit fast, but if I am going a little fast, just post a message and I will slow down a little bit. It's just that I'm just taking cognizance of the time and that we started a little bit later. So what we are doing in this online lecture, we are only going to be focusing on study unit 1. Now, the pages of the study guide that I've given you, it might not be the same as would be in your study guide, depending on which version or and how you downloaded or received the material. Now, what we are focusing on in this study unit is the crimes against the state and the administration of justice. Now, the crimes against the state, there are various crimes against the state, and since it is impossible to discuss all the offenses in detail, we will be students. Can you still see the? Do you still have access to the PowerPoint presentation? Can I just get a yes or a no? No. Okay. Then I'm going to try this again. Share content again. I am sorry. You should have told me earlier, and I am speaking to myself. Can we see that now, students? Just a yes. Perfect. I am so sorry about that. What I'm going to do then is I'm just going to recap. I don't know from when you did not see it. I'm sure you've seen the points too. And then I wanted you to also just visualize what I've told you about what is expected from you in terms of the expectations of this module. And then what I'm doing is now I've put up what it is that we are going to be discussing in terms of the study unit, which is the crimes against the state and the administration of justice. And what I wanted to tell you is that there are various statutory crimes against the state. Since it is impossible to discuss all the offenses in details, what we are going to be focusing on in our discussion is going to be the crimes of terrorism and also the crime of public violence. Now, the reason that we have chosen these two offenses is because they occur fairly regularly in practice. Okay. Now, students, you can use your chat to answer these questions. If there is something that I'm asking you, perhaps you can, it doesn't even have to be a question or what you think, you can just put in what your understanding of certain terminologies and issues are. So I'd like it to be interactive, but I would prefer it to be interactive via the chat. So now what I believe in is that I'd like to, I always believe that we need to have some kind of context on why we are dealing with terrorism and why terrorism is such an important crime in South Africa now. The importance, I would like to just quickly ask you, what do you think, looking at our historical background, or where do you think this idea of creating terrorism in terms of, sorry, let me start again. What do you think in terms, looking back at our historical background, why do you think that terrorism is now considered a crime in South Africa? So quickly on your chats, just think what you would think, or the history behind the terrorism becoming a crime in South Africa. Whilst you do that, I am sure that we have all been through our work and we've given it some time, because if you are here and you have not even read your work, you're going to find this to be out of context. You're going to find the work to be a little bit more difficult to grasp. So if you are here today, I am just assuming that you have read the study unit notes. So on your chat, don't be quiet. We were very, very loud earlier. So what do you think, looking at our historical background, do you think the importance of terrorism is to South Africa? Now, whilst you are thinking about that and writing, I think that I'm just going to tell you this. It was actually the terrorist attacks on the United States in 2011, actually, that had a profound effect on United Nations member states. Now, United Nations member states, South Africa is a party to that, is a member state of the United Nations. Now, what is the United Nations? Are you going to ask me? It's a body that has like a common morality for establishing new means of stability internationally. So because of what happened and the extent of what happened in 9/11, the United Nations decided that countries should not be so exposed to terrorist activities. So they wanted all countries who are member states to draft anti-terrorism bills. Now you'll be asking, considering we came from a path a past of apartheid, an era that was it was seeped in terrorist activities. Why didn't we have a legislation then? The issue is that I was going to say the university. What I meant is South Africa had a lot of draft legislations concerning terrorism. Okay, but up until 2011, there was no seriousness that was propelling us to have a proper legislation, and that the legislation that was promulgated after 2011 is the Protection of the Constitutional Democracy Against Terrorist and Related Activities Act. So that is the most important legislation in terms of the crime of terrorism in South Africa. Now, this act seeks to prevent acts of terror, to protect the civilian population from acts of terror, and to bring terrorists to justice. It also prohibits South Africa from being used as a haven for terrorism, and it obliges the government to cooperate with and support the international community in preventing and combating terrorism. Okay, now to go on to what you need to also understand in terms of terrorism. You'd be asking me, why do we need to learn definitions? Now, definitions can be tedious, let's face it, it can be a little bit much, but the importance of a definition lies in the fact that, individuals can have fair warning regarding the conduct that is being prohibited, and to ensure that actions are not or sanctions are not arbitrarily applied to someone because, say, for example, someone doesn't like the way you dress, or the fact that you probably ran away with the person's husband or wife or spouse or whatever. So you don't want somebody to attack you arbitrarily. So therefore, the importance of definitions. So there must be acceptable guidelines as to what is not acceptable conduct within a criminal offense. Now, if you look at this definition of terrorism, there are three aspects that are important in terms of the definition. It is one relating to an act, second relating to unlawfulness, and the third relating to specific intention. Now I'm going to go into detail on these issues a little in a few minutes. And I just want to say why it's important for you as a law student in your second year, or for potentially being lawyers. Whilst it's okay for a lay person to conflate, to confuse issues of say for example, murder and culpable homicide, for example, which is not being discussed here today, but I'm just using this as an example. It is never okay for lawyers and law students to do so, because you are held to a higher standard. But most importantly, your understanding of definitions, it will lead you to better argue your case in support of your client. Because for a person to be found guilty of crime, each and every element must be satisfied. Okay, I hope that is understandable. Before I go on, and before you get shocked at the length of the definition of terrorism, please note that the definition of terrorism is quite lengthy. So you do not have to memorize the definition of terrorism. What you must do is you must be able to read it carefully, and you must be able to identify a set of facts in an assignment or in an examination which will amount to an act of terrorism. So don't get worried. We're going to go on and discuss. Okay, I've been through that. So the first element we're going to be discussing is an act. As you can see, there is many different acts that constitute the crime of terrorism. Okay, so the object, I'm not going to go through everything, because this is something for you to read and understand and to be able to assimilate a little later. The object or the interest that is protected for the crime of terrorism is the safety and security of the Republic, its institution, and the people. Now, that is very important for you to understand. And you'll see when we go on to the public violence issue in a few moments, you'll see the difference between the interest that is protected in terrorism and the interest that is going to be protected in public violence. So the interest that is protected in terrorism is the safety and security of the Republic, its institution, and the people. Now, the act that is prohibited here, it comprises inter alia. Now, inter alia means that it includes but is not limited to. So that is a little bit of Latin education for you. So it includes, but is not limited to, the use of violence, release of toxic or harmful substances, conduct which endangers the life or physical integrity of any person, the causing of serious risk to health and safety of the public, the causing of damage to property, an act calculated to cause. What is important here is that the act must be calculated to cause serious interference with services, causing destabilization of the economy and the creation of a public emergency or insurgency. Now, students, you're going to be wondering, how do I know what are these acts? This is where I'm going to come in and tell you. If you want to know what amounts to an act of terrorism, in our beautifully drafted study guide, we make reference to case laws. Now, case laws are where you are going to go to refer to various different acts of terrorism. We give you examples. You need not know the citations. By now, you should know what a citation is. So you need not know the entire citation, but you should be able to identify a particular case with a particular set of facts relating to an act. So that is my advice. If you want more information in terms of what act is considered to be terrorism, you must please go and look at your case laws, because we don't have the time in which to go through all of that in this session. Right. Now, just to go back, remember, there are three elements to terrorism. The first one is an act, which we have discussed. Now, let's discuss the second element. So these elements are that all this must now be, one or more of these acts must be prevalent for there to be an act of terrorism. Now, the second element is the element of unlawfulness. Basically, what unlawfulness means, it's an absence of justification of the act. So where there is a justification like a self-defense or compulsion, this may justify its performance, but obviously as a law student, you have learned the caveat that it depends on the circumstances. So everything will depend on the circumstances, but generally what you need to know is that unlawfulness means an absence of the justification of an act. It is also provided in the act. You need to go and read in the act which forms part of the okay, let me restart. It is also provided for in the act itself that an act which forms part of a protest, a dissent or industrial action, and which does not intend the harm as defined is excluded from the prohibition. Remember what we said in our act and on our act, that in our element of act of terrorism is that the act must be calculated to cause serious interference with services, causing destabilization of the economy and the creation of a public emergency or insurgency. So these elements cannot be seen in isolation. These elements are linked. So the unlawfulness of the act must lead to the conduct or the act. Then to go on to, now remember the third element. So we dealt with an act, we've dealt with unlawfulness. The third element is the specific intention. Let me go down and look for my specific intention. Here, see, nope, there we go, I'm sorry. I hope you can see that now. So, in terms of a specific intention, for the crime of terrorism, a specific intention is required. Now, the intention has two components. If you look at it, it is required that the act should be performed with intention. So we say, when we say a specific intention is required, we are saying that the act should be performed with an intention, or an act by which its nature and its context can reasonably be regarded as being intended. Now, whether you intended the act to be considered, whether the intended act is considered to be terrorist or terrorism or not, does not matter if it was direct or indirect. So this is where, you remember when I went to, I'm going to go backwards and forwards. You remember when we came here and we see here, specific intention is dolus eventualis, is a sufficient form of intention. So what do we mean by that is, sorry, I'm going ahead of me there. What we mean by that is that dolus eventualis is a sufficient form of intention. What do we mean by dolus eventualis? For those of you who've either been living in the box or only born yesterday, I am sure we have all heard about the case of the Blade Runner and the infamous dolus eventualis element there. So basically, if you don't know, please go and read up on it. I think it provides good examples for you to look at. But the dolus eventualis, or what we call as legal intention, it is present when the perpetrator, he foresees that there's a possibility of his act causing a death. He foresees the possibility of his act causing public violence. There's a possibility that he foresees that any of it as act can cause serious harm. But regardless of this, he or she persists, or they persist regardless of the consequences. So you don't need to have a direct intention. Indirect intention is sufficient. Dolus eventualis is sufficient for the crime of terrorism to be proven. Okay, so basically what we are saying is, for a crime of terrorism to be proved, all these acts must be present. Not these acts, all these elements must be proven. What I need you to do, students, is if you have questions, you just put it on the chat, or you can wait for a little later until we are finished, because I just need about 10 or 12 minutes more, and then we will take your questions. I hope that is okay with you all. What I then want to go on, remember, if I go back to my slide, I told you that we are dealing with crimes against the state and the administration of justice. And the crimes against the state that we are going to be dealing with is terrorism and public violence, because they occur more frequently or regularly in practice. So we've dealt with terrorism. Let's now go on to public violence. I have been so eager to do that since the beginning. So once again, you need to understand what the definition of public violence is, because you're going to need to be able to understand what acts actually fall within the crime of public defense. Now, you remember, I told you in the beginning, if you look at the crime of terrorism, the object or the interest that is protected there, the object of the interest that are protected in the crime of terrorism was the safety and security of the republic, its institution, and the people. But what is the interest that is being protected in terms of the public violence? In terms of the crime of public violence, sorry. The interest protected in the case of public violence now is public peace and order. So you see the difference? So one is directed at the safety and security of the republic, its institution, and the people, whilst the other is directed at public peace and order. Now, obviously, there's a certain measure of overlapping that may occur between this interest and the interest protected by other crimes against the state. There is not a watertight division, and it is not always possible to differentiate between certain crimes. But this is where your understanding of the definitions become important. This is why we focus so much on the definitions of a specific crime. So that is why we will try not to give you gray areas in the examinations and in the assignments, for example. But it's up to you to ensure that you have a clear and concise understanding of what the definitions are. How do you do that? You go back to your study guide and you study and you assimilate and you understand what it means. And you understand it by looking at the case laws and the examples that we've given you there. I hope that is clear, students. Now, the issue with the crime of public violence. Public violence, I don't know if you would like me. Let me go back. I'm sorry. Let me do this again. So let's look at the elements. The public violence is the unlawful and intentional performance. So unlawful is the element of, you remember we spoke about 3 elements for terrorism. The elements here is unlawfulness. The intention here is it's intentional performance of an act. So you need the act. So you have the same amount of elements, which is the unlawfulness, the act, and the intent. So public violence is the unlawful and intentional performance of an act or acts by a number of persons, which assumes serious proportions and is intended to disturb the public peace and order by violent means or to infringe the rights of another. Now, if you have looked at your study guide, you will understand the importance of me underlining or us underlining certain words and terminology. What are the importance of this? Let me go on and reiterate. For example, when we say, we go back here, what we said that it must be by a number of persons. So let's go back. So the crime cannot be, for the crime of public violence to be proven, the crime cannot be committed by an individual acting alone. The public peace and order must be disturbed by a number of persons acting in concert. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, just hold on for me, students. I'm just 1 minute here. Okay, so I am going to make these notes and these and this information available to you as is, so you'll be able to understand better. I don't know why from my side I've just kind of lost something. I'm hoping that you'll be able. To still see it. Can you still see the Okay, thank you, students. Thank you for that. So as I said, the crime cannot be committed by an individual acting alone. The public peace and order must be disturbed by a number of persons acting in concert. And it is impossible to specify the number of persons required. This will depend on the circumstances. Now, if you go to your case law, there's various case laws in your study guide that makes reference. For example, in one case, 5 persons was considered to be a number of persons acting in concert, but in another case, 11 persons were considered to be not enough number of persons acting in concert. So it also depends on the circumstances. Now, those participating in the disturbance of the peace must act in concert with a common purpose. Now, the importance of the word here is common purpose, or your action must be directed towards a specific purpose. That's basically what it means. And once it has been established that the accused knowingly participated in an uprising with the aim of, say, for example, threatening the peace and order, I'm so sorry, the prosecution need not prove precisely which acts were committed by which of the persons. So, for example, if you all were together, you had a common purpose, there were a number of you, if you are charged with a crime of public violence, the prosecutor need not prove that you yourself was involved with in a specific act. So that is why it's important to understand what some of the what you call this, I'm sorry, I see there's a message coming up. Okay, that's why it's so important for you to understand why certain elements are specific only to the crime of public violence. So don't worry about taking notes. All my notes that you can see on here as well will be provided to you in the recording. So I would prefer that you just sit and understand, but write down the questions that you are going to ask me a little later. So as I said, you need to go and look at some of your cases that will give you specific examples about the crime of public violence. Now, I've written a note here that I need to see when we are talking about the seriousness of the crime. Remember now, the crime is only committed if, in addition to the other requirements, the action of the group assumes serious proportions. Remember, as I said, if we go back here, it must be in terms of serious proportions. So, one of the reasons for the existence of the crime is that the safety of persons not involved in the disturbance is threatened, and this will only be the case if the disturbance is serious. Now, although this requirement may be somewhat vague, and yes, it is vague, it is essential to distinguish public violence from, say, cases of, for example, rowdy behavior and family feuds, which do not threaten public peace and order. As I said as well, this is important because then people are not being arbitrarily acted upon, and you will know clearly what your rights and your limitations are in terms of the law. The other issue, the other element, remember the act, the unlawfulness, and this is now the intent. The difference between public violence and the and terrorism is not only that public violence must consist of a joint action, while terrorism can be committed by one or more individuals. So that is important. So the individual accused must have, the terrorism requires a specific intent. It is not it is different from public violence, where intent in public violence is the form of legal intention or culpability that is required. Now, the individual accused must have been aware of the nature and purpose of the actions of the group, and the participation in the activities of the groups must have been intentional. So they must have intended to participate in the activities of the group. This is the difference between public violence and terrorism. That is one of the other differences. Remember, we spoke about public interest, we spoke about the act, and now we've spoken about the seriousness, and now it's also about the intention. So students, that basically is my presentation for this morning. I know we went a little bit over. I know how tiring it can be for some students, you know, to listen to someone drone on and on, but I thought that those were important issues that I needed to highlight. So can I ask from the floor, is there any questions that you have for me? I have my trusted staff members on hand if I am unable to answer any of the questions. Okay. In the meantime, I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to ask Nelly to please switch off your camera. Calvin, can you switch off your camera? Nelly, switch off your camera. Dear students, is there anything that you want? Dare I unmute you all? Just in case there is a question. The chat function disabled and we cannot. Okay, let me try and do that. Thank you. Let me see. William, thank you for that. Let me stop recording. Let me